Hey guys, and welcome back. This is the 12th video in my Ableton Live 10 Basic series. In this video, I cover some important things to know whenever you are working with audio clips. Before we begin, just a quick reminder to leave a like down below and hit that subscribe button. This will help me continue to bring valuable content to awesome viewers like you. Firstly, in order to use audio, we can either record our own incoming audio or we can use samples. To record incoming audio, assuming your inputs are correctly hooked up, we first create an empty audio track. And then we make sure that we have selected the correct input. In my case, it's going to be this one right here. After that, you will want to come up here and arm your track. And then from here, we just simply hit record. Hello, check 1, 2. Hello, check 1, 2. And that is how you record incoming audio. Now, if you already have some audio that you want to import, such as a sample, we simply, again, just create an audio track for that. And then we just find our sample within our samples library down here, and we drag in our sample. Most samples are labeled with their BPM, but sometimes they aren't. And in that event, you should use visual and or audible cues in order to match things up. We can either warp the sample so that it matches up with our project BPM, or we can change the BPM of our project to match up with the sample. We will start by changing the sample's BPM to match our project. The first thing you'll want to do is double click on your sample, and this will open up the clip editor. And then you'll want to come down here and enable warp. Then you'll want to come down here and choose your preferred warp mode. On drum samples, you can typically leave it on beats. But for vocals or sustained instruments, I typically choose either Complex or Complex Pro. From here, we want to turn on our metronome and begin to tweak this segment BPM as we listen to the sample. This can take a couple of tries if the sample is not labeled or if you are a newer producer. But don't hesitate to just keep tweaking until it's right where you want it. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this. And oftentimes if you have transients here, then you can actually use those as visual cues to get your sample to match up with your project BPM. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play and just start tweaking. Alright, that sounds good to me, and that is how you would match up your sample with the project. Now let's say you just want to change the BPM of your project in order to sync it up with your sample. Firstly, you want to make sure that warp mode is turned off on the sample itself. Otherwise, whenever you change the project BPM, it will actually change the sample with it. Next, you just make sure that metronome is turned on, and once more, we'll just use our eyes and ears to match things up. Alrighty, that sounds good to me. Now we're going to talk a little bit about transposing your audio. If you want to transpose or notch the key of a sample up or down without altering the timing of that sample, then you must first enable warp mode. Otherwise, when you transpose up or down, it will cause the sample to go out of tempo with your project. So just make sure warp mode is first enabled, and then we can change our pitch. I recommend playing around with the different modes like Complex and Complex Pro whenever you are transposing. Sometimes transposing can give you some nasty artifacts that you don't want, and some warp modes can just simply work better than others. So let's go ahead and do a quick little audio demo here. So the last thing I would like to cover in this video is making simple time edits. This can seriously come in handy whenever you are trying to get a good vocal mix. Sometimes the singer can just be slightly out of time at any given point, and this is more or less just a fast way to fix that. So I went ahead and dragged in a vocal sample, and I'm just going to pretend like it's out of time at some certain point, even though I haven't even gotten it in BPM with my project or anything, but more or less this is just to show you how to do this. So the first thing you want to do is enable warp mode, and we're going to go to complex mode. So we're going to listen back to this real quick.
As I lost myself.
So let's just say that this part where he says myself is slightly out of tune and we need to adjust it a little bit. If you come up here and you double click on this gray area, you can actually place these markers. I'm going to place one there and I'm going to place one right here. Normally for the two outer markers, you want them to be during a quiet spot or just a space where not much is being said. And you want to make sure that the distance between them is spread all the way across that specific phrase. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set a point right on top of where that word begins, which looks to be right about here.
As I lost myself.
That's pretty darn close. So let's just say I want to move this forward a couple notches.
As I lost myself in the nowhere.
Or perhaps just back a notch.
As I lost myself in the nowhere.
Again, this can take a little bit of trial and error, especially when just placing your markers, because whenever you're adjusting things, it can introduce aliasing, especially if you're making really drastic adjustments. But this is more or less just a straightforward way to achieve a simple timing edit. If we were to do something crazy like take it way out of time, then you would hear those artifacts I'm talking about.
As I lost myself in the no.
See, it just sounds crazy.
As I lost myself.
Alrighty, that's a wrap for this tutorial. I want to thank you all for watching, and if you found this video useful, please consider sharing or subscribing. I hope to see you all back for the next one, and until then, take care and have an amazing day.